Hey, what's going on, guys? The Horror Man back, putting a positive spin on A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake. Just a reminder, the Positive Spin series is a series in which Jason from Horrific Nightmares and I watch and discuss movies that are typically universally hated by the masses. These are not review videos, they are simply a way for us to point out the positives about each film. That's something we think escapes a lot of people. You can dislike a movie, but still find things that you do enjoy about it. At times, we will even be watching movies we don't particularly like, but we will still give them a positive spin. This is not one of those. Despite what many of you say about A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake, this is not a bad film. You might not like it, but that doesn't make it objectively bad. There is a difference. Some of you don't understand that. Just because I like something doesn't mean it's necessarily good, and just because you dislike something doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Now, I should start by saying I am literally refilming this video right now. I had already filmed this video and it was about 10 minutes and 30 seconds long. This one may end up being the same length, or it could be shorter or longer. That's not the reason for the redo. I felt I came across a bit harsh in my first video. I had filmed it immediately after Jason and I finished rewatching the movie. I have to be honest, at that moment, I was pissed. We both were. Not pissed at people's negative opinions per se, but the nonsensical reasons they give for having those opinions. This film is not nearly as disappointing as some of your reactions to it. This movie is a perfect example of why we started this series. By the way people talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, you would think this is the worst movie ever, but that's not the case. Again, you might not necessarily like it, but that doesn't make it the worst remake ever. Enough with the exaggeration, guys. If this is the worst horror film you've ever seen, then you haven't seen enough horror films. With movies like this, and especially this one in particular, I'm starting to believe it's a case of people telling you you should hate it. You thinking you're going to hate it. Some of you even wanting to hate it. So ultimately, you claim to hate it. Sometimes, for a lot of you, it appears you just want to follow the trend, the path of least resistance. It's just easier to have a closed mind when watching poorly received horror films, especially remakes like this one. Now, the point of the Positive Spin series is to put a positive spin on these movies, whether we like them or not. This remake is one I've always liked. In fact, I like it more every time I watch it. I've even been criticized for liking it, which I find ironic. I've been insulted for promoting movies that I like, while others trash films just because. Doesn't that seem backwards to some of you? Isn't being positive a good thing? A lot of you will use the excuse, you're just being honest. You're a film critic and you need to tell people the truth. Well, very few of you are actual film critics. We are all just movie fans. Not to mention, film criticism was originally created to promote movies. And also, the excuse of being honest is a bit hypocritical. The truth is objective. It is not based on opinion. If you want to give your subjective opinions about a movie, that's one thing. But there is a difference between saying something is the worst film ever and something is your least favorite. Those two are not mutually exclusive. An opinion does not define what makes a bad movie. With all of that being said, This positive spin series is not a way to debate or belittle anyone else's opinions. Many of you do not hold back when sharing yours, so these are just my opinions. A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake, was an easy one to give a positive spin, and I'll get to the reasons why in just a minute. But first, let's discuss the most popular reasons people who hate this film seem to give. Honestly, some of them just do not make sense, or are even non-existent. So let me debunk them for you now. Again, I am not trying to debunk your opinions. I am just debunking the objectivity of those claims. Many of these claims, by the way, come from fellow YouTubers and even opinions written on message boards. I'll start with an easy one to debunk. Some people actually claim that Freddy does not use his glove enough to kill his victims in this remake. That is absolutely absurd. He uses his glove with every kill other than one, I believe. As a matter of fact, the Freddy in this remake kills with his glove more than Robert Englund's Freddy in the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. Seriously, go back and watch. A lot of people hate that Freddy was a child molester in the remake, as opposed to just being a child killer, like in the original. Well, here's some news for you guys. He was originally intended to be a child molester in the original Elm Street. In my opinion, that makes it more disturbing, and it makes him more menacing. In the remake, he was a child molester who was murdered by the parents of his victims. He then returns in the kids' nightmares as they grow older to seek revenge for ratting him out. That is his motive for killing them. When you think about it, it actually makes more sense than the original. In '84's Elm Street, the parents of the Elm Street kids murdered Freddy because of the potential of hurting their children. In the remake, they kill him because he has already harmed them. Think about it. With him not being a child molester in the original Elm Street, that means he never did anything to hurt Nancy. Nancy's parents joined the lynch mob to prevent Freddy from doing anything to her eventually. In this remake, however, Nancy was already a victim. I'm not sure why some of you claim that doesn't make sense for Freddy to be a murderer after being a child molester in this one. He was literally seeking revenge on the kids who ratted him out. Going back to the glove, a lot of people claim there is no reason for him to have the glove in this remake. But if you actually pay attention to the movie, you would see that he uses the glove on the children when he was molesting them. He clearly used it as a weapon of intimidation and a way to harm the kids. Then, once he comes back in their nightmares, he uses it to kill them. How the hell is that a negative? Another excuse people use to hate this film is the appearance of the boiler room in the nightmares. Some claim it's out of place and makes no sense with this storyline. But again, if you actually watch and pay attention to the film, you would see that Freddy is killed by the parents in a boiler room. He runs into a warehouse and is clearly burned alive in the boiler room of that building. So yes, the boiler room does make sense in this film. These are not opinions I'm debunking, guys. These are straight facts. Liking or disliking something doesn't mean you can change the truth. The last big negative I'll mention that people claim is the CGI. I'll give you that one. Admittedly, I do wish they could have used more practical effects as opposed to CGI. With that being said, it's not terrible. I don't watch it and think, geez, this is horrible CGI. I simply think, I wish they used practical effects. It does not take me out of the film, or ruin the entire movie for me, like some of you claim. People use that CGI to say they hate the look of Freddy in the movie. But here's the thing. This remake Freddy actually looks more accurate to that of a real-life burn victim. The original Robert Englund Freddy is more of a scarred monster. Jackie Earle Haley's Freddy looks more like a burn victim. Despite the CGI, it's more realistic. That doesn't mean you can't prefer the look of Robert Englund's Freddy, but to say that's a reason why you hate this one seems a bit short-sighted. Nostalgia plays a heavy role in these remakes, guys. Believe me, I know. Not everything has to be a competition, though. If you judge this movie with an open mind on its own merits, I think you might like it more than you claim you do. Who knows? Maybe not. Some of you are stubborn. Now, speaking of Jackie Earle Haley, that's one thing I think most people would agree on, that he did a fantastic job in the role. Yes, Robert Englund is iconic as the character. He's legendary. But that doesn't mean Jackie Earle Haley wasn't great, too. I know this might sound shocking to a lot of you, but I'm just going to say it. I actually think, in some ways, Jackie Earle Haley's Freddy is scarier than Robert Englund's. His voice is creepier. And again, the fact that he was a child molester makes it more disturbing. Even though he delivers jokes, they're a bit more unsettling, mean-spirited. That's how it should be. As entertaining as a lot of the Elm Street sequels are, they got a bit goofy later on in the franchise. Freddy's Dead, for example. Slasher villains, as much as we love them, are not supposed to be anti-heroes. They are supposed to be villains. And they're supposed to be scary. That's not to say Robert Englund wasn't scary as Freddy, because he was, especially in the original film, and even Wes Craven's New Nightmare. But Jackie Earle Haley in this remake is equally, if not scarier. Some more positives for this positive spin. I love the use of dream, dream, dream in this movie. It's played during the pharmacy scene and then over the end credits. It's so fitting. The score of this remake is also fitting. It's darker, and so is the movie. Even the daytime scenes have a dreary look to them. The opening credits have sort of a hypnotic quality to them. Even when on pause, the text seems to move around the screen. It's surreal, like a nightmare. This is another remake that has a good balance of being similar to the original, but also doing something new. It's not too much of the same, but it's not too different either. I really like the young cast. I think they did a great job, and they're portrayed as intelligent characters. That's unique in a slasher film. I like the older cast as well. Connie Britton, Clancy Brown, and of course, as aforementioned, Jackie Earle Haley. He was phenomenal in this. So brilliant, in fact, that as the unburned Fred Krueger, he manages to gain sympathy from the viewers. He genuinely seems innocent during the lynch mob scene. And despite having seen this film many times now, it always dupes me. I find myself forgetting that he was in fact guilty of molesting the kids. The movie does a good job of convincing you otherwise, along with the characters. This is a topic Jason and I discussed quite in-depthly while watching the film. The kills in this remake are brutal, maybe even more brutal than the original. There are some really good shots in this remake, really good shots. I love the mystery element of it too, and the survivors trying to track down all of the Elm Street kids. Plus, there's that really cool scene of the vlogger's death. I know some people take issue with the whole micro-naps storyline, but I like it. Some of you use that as another excuse to hate the movie, saying it doesn't make sense. It's a horror film, guys. Suspend disbelief. It's a movie about a killer who comes back in people's nightmares and murders them for real. But you have a problem with the science of micro-naps? It's just another reason for me to believe some of you are just so intent on hating this. It's okay, but I wish you'd at least be honest with yourselves and admit you're not giving it a fair chance. And by fair chance, I don't mean watching it a couple of times and not paying attention. You need to go into it with an open mind, just as you should with any movie. Based on some of the negative opinions of this film I mentioned earlier, it makes me wonder if a lot of you have, number one, even seen the movie, number two, saw it once and forgot about it, and number three, have watched it a couple of times but have not paid attention. It's the only way to explain some of those claims that are downright wrong or non-existent. I know many of us grew up watching the Elm Street franchise, so we love the original and mostly all of its sequels. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But just because this remake exists doesn't mean those other movies just go away. This should be judged on its own, and when doing that, I would actually rank it pretty high in my franchise ranking. It would probably be number 4 or 5 in the series for me. That probably sounds really high for a lot of you, but what can I say? I love it. I can now see that this video is going to be much longer than the previous one I filmed, but like I said, I was pissed. You can dislike this remake all you want, but the amount of hate it gets is just ridiculous. I'm not asking you to like it, and I'm not asking you to agree. This is just my positive spin. Be sure to check out Jason's as well, because I know he has a lot to say about this remake too. Do you hate the A Nightmare on Elm Street remake? And if so, why? Please be respectful and logical when you comment below and let me know. Or are you also a fan of this one? That would be refreshing. Jason and I firmly believe there's nothing wrong with giving a movie a positive spin. Which will we discuss next? Check back soon to find out. Until then, thanks for watching, guys. Hit that thumbs up and be kind. Subscribe.